have a few we have a few folks here who are on this. Sister Christine, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm okay. Could always be doing better trying to figure out how to use this technology, but I think we are recording live on Facebook. So I'm just going to proceed as if we actually got it right this time.
Okay.
Okay, but basically, we just wanted to have a discussion, those who can participate, to really talk about reparations and self-determination for the Black communities of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County and what that might look like as far as reparations.
Okay.
So that's generally the type of discussion that we want to have this afternoon. I'm not sure whether people can see some of the poll questions that had originally been posted. But the poll questions were very basic and fundamental. We just wanted to ask people what they thought reparations might look like within our city and within our county. And then we wanted to ask people what the process might be. So what reparations would look like and what the reparational process might entail in terms of how it would be organized and how it would be distributed and how it would be managed as well. So those are some of the things we wanted to talk about this afternoon. I don't anticipate we're going to have a very long meeting. This is supposed to be on Facebook Live, but again, sometimes we struggle with this technology, and hopefully it's being broadcast. But if it isn't, I really apologize to those people who had anticipated being part of this overall discussion. But I'm glad that you were able to get on. How's everything been going for you?
Things is okay, doing a couple projects and whatever, but yeah, always interested in talking about, the betterment of our people.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So we just want to take a few moments again, just to kind of go over it and hear from people such as yourself and anyone else who's interested who may get on as to what reparations might look like within the city of Pittsburgh and then throughout Allegheny County. So any ideas, anything that you like to contribute to this ongoing discussion?
What I'm really worried about mostly is how we treat each other, African Americans. The respect that I see from back in the day is not what I see right now. It's more of disrespect. Before, I guess the agenda was different because they had to stick together, but we should never get away from still sticking together from when, Martin Luther King and they had their little coalition going on for voting rights for African Americans. I think we should get back into, we shouldn't have never left it because we got caught slipping. And that's why a lot of things are happening with the police and our kids. And, it's just a variety of things that I believe we failed in. We should have just kept it going instead of getting relaxed because we were able to get decent jobs. We didn't know that they were still in the background, still doing their thing. We should have kept the fight on stronger. So.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. One of the things that Dr. King spoke about before he was assassinated, he actually spoke about economic justice, and he spoke to economic inequalities that exist here within the United States that existed in 1967 and 1968, before he was murdered. And he talked about reparations, actually. And he gave a brief historical overview. He talked about the benefits that had been allotted to European immigrants who would come here to the United States. And let's not even talk about the transatlantic slave trade. He talked about the benefits that were allotted to European immigrants in terms of land grants and land grants for farming and agriculture and for like industrial development, but also land grants to develop colleges and universities so their young people, their youth could be better educated and better prepared to take charge of their future. And then he contrasted that with the historical experience of those of us of African descent who were enslaved people. And basically the question that Dr. King had posed in this brief overview that he gave, and you can find this, I believe, on Facebook or perhaps YouTube. He talked about the need for economic justice and economic balance. You know, one of the last great things that Dr. King was involved with, matter of fact, two of the last great things that we know of that Dr. King was involved with before he was murdered were, one, his support for the sanitation workers, you know, basically the Black working class, support for the working class to get better paying jobs and to get benefits and to be able to work in a wholesome environment. And he supported the sanitation workers down in Memphis. And ultimately, we know that he traveled to the area to not just give verbal support, but his physical presence. And that is where he met his untimely death. And then the other thing that we know Dr. King for before he was murdered was to move to organize a poor people's campaign that would bring together poor people from all around the world, excuse me, from all across the country, and namely the poor from amongst the so-called ghettos in the rural areas as well, right? To bring everybody together to converge on Washington, D.C., and to demand economic justice and to demand a fair distribution of economic resources. So it wasn't about just civil rights. You know, Dr. King had recognized that there was a strong connection between the pursuit of civil rights and making sure that people can meet their everyday needs. And so I think it's important that we recognize that as we talk about reparations, we need to keep in mind that this is not a new demand. It certainly goes back hundreds of years. Folks who have been enslaved, who were able to obtain their freedom, would actually demand some type of reparational justice connected to their period of enslavement. And this happened before the Civil War. This happened before the Declaration, the Emancipation Proclamation. This happened before the era that we know as Black Reconstruction. So, you know, we have Black people enslaved, Black folks, or people who have been formerly enslaved who would demand their reparations after having obtained their freedom. And this, again, this goes back to the 18th century, the 19th century, before the Civil War, and certainly after the Civil War, you know, when newly freed slaves started to build things for themselves, but they also wanted justice for all the work that they had done before in terms of the labor. So the reason I say that is because many people recognize that a lot of the violence, the disrespect that we see today, and the disrespect and violence that we've seen develop over several generations is rooted in the gross inequities that we as folks of African descent have had to deal with. And so, as you know as well, even after being freed from the physical slavery, or what was supposed to be the legality of the physical slavery.
Glad you back.
Yes, I think there was a problem with my internet.
Okay.
It kind of went down for a moment. So if you could just give me a second, and we can get back on the right track. As my folks used to tell me, if it's not one thing, it's another. So this is one of those days. So as I was saying before, many of us recognize that a lot of the disrespect, the violence that we see displayed within our communities and neighborhoods is rooted within the systems and the structures of injustice and inequity, basically promoted and solidified through white supremacy. So when we talk about not just racism, we're talking about the system, the institution, and structures that perpetuate and that consolidate and defend white power, right? At the expense of Black humanity, at the expense of the humanity of other people, especially people of color, but notably Black people here within this country. And so when we talk about being able to get respect and being able to generate a more stable community, you know, with a greater sense of what it means to be a human being, we have to recognize that much of the dysfunction and much of the reactionary behaviors we see so prevalent throughout different communities is a result, again, of the type of economic injustice and economic inequality, which is at the root and heart of the economic model that we happen to live under, which is capitalism. And so as long as we have this particular type of model, we will continue to have to go through these cycles up and down and continue to have to have a few people who control just about everything, with the vast majority of people who control hardly anything and who have very little. And so that breeds discontent, and it breeds desperation, and it breeds, in some people, criminality. The criminality that's rooted in what many people believe are the only outlets for their survival, which could be selling drugs, which could be burglarizing, which could be robbery, which could be exploitation. When we talk about sexual exploitation, human trafficking, I mean, we could go on and on and on. A lot of this stuff is rooted, really rooted in economic injustice and inequity, and also a culture that puts more focus on things and objects as opposed to human beings. And so, yes, I agree with you. You know, we have to find ways to address the disrespect that exists within our different communities, and that disrespect is played out in how we treat one another, and not only how we disrespect other people, but even how we disrespect ourselves. Many of us sometimes demonstrate little regard for our own health and safety. The things that we consume, the things that we eat, the things that we drink, the way that we live our lives is very reckless and very fatalistic, as if we don't believe there's any hope for us in the future. And so all of that is something that we have to correct. So again, I see we have somebody else who just jumped in. I want to welcome you to the discussion. Again, this is a discussion regarding reparations for the Black communities of the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. Any ideas, any thoughts? What would reparations look like, and how might the reparational justice process be pursued? How would we do this? Do we just have a big meeting, all the Black folks in Pittsburgh and all the Black folks in Allegheny County, and pass out checks? I mean, what might this process look like? And what might reparations itself look like? Do we want land? Do we want money? Do we want free healthcare? Do we want housing vouchers that guarantee mortgages, or maybe not mortgages, housing vouchers, period, where you get the necessary money to buy yourself a home, or maybe you get the necessary money to make a substantial down payment on the purchase of a home? You know, what would reparations look like? I'd like to hear from you. You know, what do you guys think?
I know the Holocaust survivors, Germany, and this is just an idea, this is out of our country, but they're still paying them to this day. And their reparations is basically money for the survivors. So you could do a lot with money. You could buy homes, you can buy, you know, start your own business. So money is always on the table, I think. Because you could do so much with it. But housing is a big issue for African Americans, working families, and single mothers. So that's a good way to go, I think.
So housing. So we're talking about maybe housing subsidies, housing vouchers? Are we talking about maybe um, a substantial down payment, or perhaps purchasing an entire home, you know, just an out and out?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes, that, but also, this is just my vision only because of, um, what was it? Black, when they had their own community, where they burned it down. I don't know why I can't think. Black Wall Street.
Oh, okay, okay.
I mean, it would be so amazing to see something like that. We're never going to be accepted, and we definitely already proved that we could do things on our own. Um, I don't know. I'm just putting that on the table as well, because as I read about it, how prominent those African Americans were and successful that they were. Um, that's just a vision that I wish that I lived to even see.
So we're talking about, I mean, just kind of based on what you just described, yes, we talked about mortgages. I hate to use the term a mortgage, because a mortgage means that you still owe.
You
And you're
still
still
have to
going,
pay.
and you still have to
Mhm.
pay.
Right.
I think for a lot of us, we would like to be able to have a home, period, with no mortgage. That as part of our reparational package, we should be able to have a home that is completely paid for. But for some people, they may not want to have a full-fledged house. Some people would prefer to rent, and maybe they should have rent that is being paid for, that is being subsidized for the rest of their life, or perhaps a voucher to that extent, a lifelong voucher. And perhaps just like land and other assets were transferable from businesses, corporations, and governments and individuals who benefited from the transatlantic slave trade and Jim Crow, then perhaps those vouchers should be transferable to other generations on an as needed basis. But that's just an idea. But the other thing that you spoke about was basically economic development, and maybe economic development districts, right? Um, Places where you have exclusive or the majority Black-owned businesses that are functional, that are funded, that are financed, and that are vibrant parts of whatever's going on with us as Black people. One thing about Pittsburgh, and I would probably say Allegheny County, period. But let's look at the city of Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh only has one venue that is really exclusive to the Black community, and that's the August Wilson Center, right? And it's not owned by the Black community. It's owned by the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust that took it over several years back, and that at some point wanted to remove the full name for the August Wilson Center, which is the August Wilson Center for African American Culture. The Pittsburgh Trust and some other people wanted to chop off the African American part of it. They just wanted to be called the August Wilson Center, because they wanted to be able to derive the international notoriety and the marketing benefit, which is financial benefit, from using August Wilson's name. But they did not want to recognize that the greatness of August Wilson is based upon the greatness of the Black community that he wrote about, that he described for over 50, 60 years or so. And so they wanted to rename it again. It was called the August Wilson Center for African American Culture. They wanted to call it the August Wilson Center and take out the African American part. But luckily for us, there were some very brave and courageous people, Sister Renee Wilson and some other people, and pardon me if I don't remember everyone's name. There's another sister, these are relatives of August Wilson, but they're also community organizers and activists throughout the area. And they stood up and they shared their issues with the larger Black community and other concerned people. And so eventually there was enough pushback that the name August Wilson Center for African American Culture has been retained. However, the August Wilson Center itself is not owned by the Black community, right? And that's really the only almost exclusive Black venue here within the city of Pittsburgh. All throughout the city of Pittsburgh, you have social space, entertainment space, restaurants, and everything else that is basically for the white folk, right? You can go to the north side of Pittsburgh. It's a section that they now call the North Shore. It's basically for white people. If you go to the south side, it's basically for white people. If you go to the different centers on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, they're basically for white people, right? Uh, the cultural venues, the messaging, the entertainment, the eateries, the restaurant, the family places, the fun places for young people, it's basically for white folks, right? So
Yeah,
throughout the city of Pittsburgh, we don't really see ourselves. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and I think they don't want us to see ourselves, but August Wilson was a poet for Black America. So so was it the funds that they're saying that they wouldn't get funds because of that title for African Americans? You would have their, like you said, that it came from Caucasian people that built the August Wilson Center or put money into it. And that's why they probably don't want African Americans' name on there, because they poured the money into it.
yeah, but again, they poured some money into it, but they're making money and they're being able to attract not just national attention, but international attention because of the works and the creativity and the genius of a
Right.
Black man,
Right.
from Pittsburgh, who wrote
Exactly.
about the Black experience in
Exactly.
Pittsburgh,
They wrote about the Black
that
experience.
wrote about the Black experience in Pittsburgh, and
Right.
then put Pittsburgh on the map because of his writings. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
His writings became plays. Some of the plays became films. People have won all types of awards, either Tony Awards or Oscars, because of the work of August Wilson. So, and he was a Black man, and he came from a Black community, and he wrote about life and culture and growing up within that Black community over a period of several decades. So again, those are the kind of things that we have to look at when we talk about reparations. What would reparations look like? You know, you talked about some type of economic development, maybe some type of economic district, like what you made reference to. It was the area up in Oklahoma that was known as Black Wall Street, right? That right outside of Tulsa, that unfortunately was burnt down in I do believe 1921. And there were many of our people in that area who were murdered. So not only were Black people murdered, but their property and their homes were either burnt to the ground or they were taken over by the white vigilantes and by the state that existed at that time. Because make no doubt about it, that it wasn't just a group of angry white people. It was angry white people in collusion with the law enforcement community that basically did what they did. So bringing it back here to Pittsburgh in Allegheny County, what would reparations look like for us in light of the history of Black Wall Street, and in light of the fact that here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, we see very little that reflects the Black community in terms of business and in terms of culture and in terms of entertainment or social outlet? What would it look like? What do you think?
Good question.
Yeah. So we're
Black Wall Street, if that's what you're asking, I came in and had to settle my little niece down. But I just see thriving businesses. I see very successful businesses. When I think of Black Wall Street, when I look, think about it as we can do more today. I just would like to see, like you said earlier, more of us, just more of us, in various different positions in the community. And stick to it. and be more village-like.
Okay.
I don't like that there's a lot of competition between us as a people in certain areas, but in light of everything, there is a lot of good too. Moreover than, more positive than negative. But I would love to see, and I'm gonna Google more about Black Wall Street so I can educate myself a little bit more. But I'm a grandmother myself, and it's just, I just know how I was raised in the Homewood area and the stories I've heard and the businesses that I've seen that my Uncle Wally G owned, the Brass Rail, and the Name of the Gang, just, they were just nice spots. And I know that because my family partied a lot, but then my mom was a bluebird, and we had block parents, neighborhood watch. We had all those things. We had a lot of block parties. So I would look at Wall Street and bringing those things back that made my childhood so wonderful, even in the hood. You understand? So, but it takes us to be like-minded, to see everyone's different point and bring it all together to make us, something happen good for our community. So that's how I see Black Wall Street.
Okay.
I see it like that.
Okay, that makes a lot
If
of
that
sense.
makes sense.
No, it does. It does. It does. We need, yes, we need to foster more cooperation and more unity amongst us as Black people. And you're right, there is a lot of competition that goes on within the Black community. And sometimes that competition is not very healthy, because sometimes competition, in many instances, competition can be a good thing because we can compete to do better. We can compete amongst ourselves to produce better products, provide better services, or just fundamentally compete to be a better person, right? But sometimes what we have within the Black community, especially in more recent years, we have a lot of competition among and between different groups and organizations. And a lot of it is fueled by, number one, a need for recognition. And then number two, is fueled by outside resources, funding. And so people who in most situations would be friends and brothers and sisters and allies and comrades are now competitors. And they're not competitors because their ideas are so divergent. They're competitors because they're trying to get some funding from a foundation or funding from a corporation or some company. And so they don't have to, but they decide to do some cutthroat, underhanded, undermined things in order to promote their group and their organization compared to another group and organization, all supposedly in the name of some so-called social justice. We have a lot of that going on in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, and it's gotten quite profound over the last 4 or 5 years, right? But let's talk about some things that are impacting our community from the outside. For example, about a week or so ago, I was a part of an audience doing what is called a post-agenda meeting. This was a post-agenda meeting held at the City County building in the chambers of Pittsburgh City Council. And it was a post-agenda hearing that featured expert testimony about banks and financial institutions within the city of Pittsburgh and their deliberate failure to make loans to Black people. And I was really shocked. I was really shocked. First of all, I was shocked to find out that within the city of Pittsburgh, there are approximately 900 different banks, financial institutions, lending institutions, from banks to mortgage companies to finance companies to pensions that make loans, over 900 within the city of Pittsburgh. And I was further shocked and angered to find out that over the last 10 years, 500 plus of these institutions have not made one loan to one Black person in the entire city of Pittsburgh. Think about that. I think the number was like 560 or 575. So 560 to 575 institutions, banks, mortgage companies, finance companies, and pension funds made not one loan to one Black person in the city of Pittsburgh over a 10-year period. You would think that would be almost mathematically impossible, okay? You would think these would be the type of numbers that we would expect if we were reading some type of report from the Jim Crow era, 1950s, 1960s, in some place in the Deep South, right, in Mississippi and Alabama. But no, this is right here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And this is over a recent 10-year period of time where 550 to 575 financial institutions, banks, mortgage companies, so forth and so on, did not make one loan to one Black person in the entire city of Pittsburgh. And some of these institutions are within walking distance of Black communities and Black neighborhoods, right? The other shocking thing was to find out that based on the study, if you lived in a predominantly Black community or neighborhood within the city of Pittsburgh, and if there was a white person who wanted to move into your neighborhood and there was, say, a house that they wanted to buy, that person could actually apply for a mortgage and get the mortgage to move into your neighborhood. And you would apply for the same mortgage, maybe to buy a house or a new house, and you wouldn't get it, right? And these were banking institutions that may be in walking distance or certainly not too far from your neighborhood. But you could have been born and raised in that neighborhood. Your grandparents and parents could have been living in that neighborhood, but that bank would not give you a mortgage, but they would give a white person who wanted to move into your neighborhood a mortgage, at the drop of a heartbeat. So again, those numbers were very shocking, but the real challenge for us is, what are we going to do about it? And so that's why we have to have these continued discussions about reparations. What would reparations look like for our people in Pittsburgh and throughout Allegheny County? And certainly when we talk about housing, we talk about mortgages. For us, reparations has to be more than just, the banks are now going to open up the process more to make mortgages, to provide mortgages to more and more Black people. That's not reparations. That's only doing what you should have been doing. We talk about reparations for all the harm and injury that's connected to the enslavement of folks of African descent, to the transatlantic slave trade, to the Jim Crow era, to the impact of mass incarceration, all of that stuff that has happened and that continues to happen to Black people, not individually, but as a collective. 40, 45, 50 million, whatever number you feel comfortable with, Black people in this country, for the most part, continue to be exploited and oppressed as a group. And even those of us who, may think that we're beyond that because we've achieved some degree or level of economic success or financial success, it doesn't take much. You may be in your car, you may be shopping somewhere, someone doesn't recognize you as a celebrity, as that famous basketball star or football star or actor or actress. They don't recognize you and you get pulled over by the police, or you get stopped coming out of a high-end fashion store and accused of maybe shoplifting because they don't recognize you as being a multimillionaire. So we continue to be subject to all types of discrimination. Oftentimes it's racial-based discrimination, and sometimes it's race and class, because people may not recognize that you can pay for something and that you own something. So they treat you not just as a Black person, they treat you as a poor Black person, as a working class Black person, who, how dare you have this new car or live in this particular neighborhood or come to shop in this particular store. And we've all read about and heard these horror stories of Black people who were financially well off, but still were subject to the horrors and to the subjugation connected to white supremacy and connected to colonialism here with the United States. Because indeed, we as Black people are a separate group they look at us as a separate group, and we get treated as a separate group, even though, there's always the call for everybody being together and we're all Americans. But, having been here for 400 years, if we're still not being treated like we're all just Americans, and what I say is that we're all not just Americans, that Black people indeed make up and constitute a separate entity here within what we call the United States of America. So any thoughts about that? Any thoughts about the information that I just shared about the study regarding the banking and the finance industry here within Pittsburgh?
Right. So that's what Brian Allen is doing. He's a TV entertainer in a media world. And that's what he's been doing because he sued Comcast. He's been he was a writer for comedy, and then he was on, I think it was Entertainment Tonight or whatever, but that's what he's been doing in the court system. He's been taking them to court, and I think he sued Comcast. He went all the way to the Supreme Court, and I think he sued McDonald's, and I think he sued, so he's real successful. He's using that action lawsuit from what, 1800s or something. Can't figure out the year, but he's using that and he's winning. He's winning in court that they're discriminating against African Americans. So I know that's one thing that I know that one person is doing and being successful in the racism as far as the banks and all that. It's a shame you have to go all the way to the Supreme Court, but he's winning and he's winning money. And I always feel that when that's always a plus for the community, when you see that discrimination, fight for it. Because you're bringing money. If you can't get it one way, you can get it that way. Sue them, bring it back to our community. And that's what he's been doing. He's suing. He sued a lot of entities, as far as that discrimination. And that's one way to do it, because when you start hitting their pockets, they don't like that. They don't like money out their pockets, because that's what the discrimination was always about with us. They always wanted all the money and didn't want us to have anything, or the success or the good way of living, So I do know that about him. I read about that, Brian Allen.
Yeah, I think I heard something about his lawsuits and his work to try to get a certain type of justice or equity around. I believe it was ownership of certain TV stations or communication stations, radio and TV. I don't know all the details. And I think what he cited was perhaps some of the civil rights acts of, not the civil rights laws and acts that we know of from the 20th century, because most of us are familiar with, for example, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 65 and the Fair Housing Acts of 68. But he cited civil rights laws that were written after the Civil War came to an end, during the period of what we call Reconstruction. And so he cited a lot of those particular laws, and it did catch him off guard. It caught the people who were being sued, those companies, it caught them off guard. So, yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that's a very good point. We have to use the courts to push for justice. But again, the movement for reparations has to be firmly grounded in the people such as us. It has to be based and grounded in just regular, everyday Black people, right? It's great that we can have lessons learned and we can have some examples from Black celebrities and others. But in order for the movement to really be successful, it has to be led by us, just the regular people, because we're the ones who have been suffering the most, and we're the ones who have the most to lose and to continue to lose if we don't get reparations. And so we have to push and we have to take charge. Can't leave it up to the movie stars, y'all. Can't leave it up to the basketball players and football players. We need to welcome them into the battle, and we definitely need their support. But in terms of leading the charge has to be led by regular Black folks. It can't be
I'm just, I was just giving you an idea of what I read about with him. But let me ask you a question. Is the NAACP still active?
The NAACP in Pittsburgh is still active.
I never hear anything.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
at a now, I can't speak to the extent of their activity, but a couple of months ago, I was at a rally on the Hill at Freedom Corner, and there were, quite a few representatives there from the NAACP. They had just
Okay.
had a local election, and I do believe they've elected a new president. And so there were some people there from the NAACP as well.
Okay. I just wanted to know because I seen
Mhm.
something on Facebook with a young lady. I think her name was Allison Calloway. And I seen something that was so disturbing, and I'm getting off of it a little bit because I just wanted to know about the NAACP because I'm talking about African Americans as a whole, and I know we're talking about reparations.
Mhm.
But Allison Calloway, she put something on Facebook how the cops were following her because she testified against a police officer. And I was just wondering when I seen that, was the NAACP still involved? Because that was on social media. And I don't know if the young girl got help or do they look at that and try to fight for her because she's just one young lady. And I was just wondering about that because that was disturbing to me and it bothered me. So I was just wondering, we don't have to get off the subject, but that's why I raised that question.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a good question. One thing's for certain, the movement for reparations within the city and within our county is going to require all of us to step up and to put in more time and more energy. It's not going to be one particular organization, whether it's our organization or the NAACP or one church here or one mosque there or one temple here. It's going to require a real massive amount of energy to push this agenda forward, right?
Yes.
We can't rely on, again, we can't rely on the Black celebrity class. We can't exclusively rely on the Black political class. I'm talking about our public officials. Some of them, do some good things from time to time, and we need to applaud them when they do the good work, and we need to support them, right? But we can't exclusively rely on them. They represent us. And if we're not pushing the agendas that matter to us, then we should not get angry when they don't uplift those type of agendas. Because again, they're only representatives. They're only supposed to represent our interests. It's not up to them per se to define and articulate our interests. Their job is to represent our interests. Now, sometimes they do articulate it, right? And that's good, but it's really fundamentally up to us to identify, right, what our interests are. We have to identify reparations for our city and our county as a priority, because if we don't do that, again, most public officials are not going to touch that. And I'm not just talking about white public officials, I'm talking about Black public officials too. Most of them are not going to deal with reparations. And if they do deal with reparations, it's going to be in a very superficial way. It is not going to represent fundamentally what reparations really are supposed to be. So they'll talk about perhaps, some money for economic development within a certain Black neighborhood or a certain Black community. That's not reparations, right? We have to be clear. Reparations means that there's damage that was done, repairs must be made, and repairs take the shape and form of XYZ, cash, land, benefits, housing, release of political prisoners. We need to put that out there too, right? Because we have Black people who fought for Black people, right? Some fought with arms, some were framed, right? But however they wind up in jail, we have Black people who fought for our freedom, right? Before some of us was even born, okay? And they still sitting up in these prisons. I'm talking about people from the Black Panther Party, people from the Republic of New Africa, and those type of groups of organizations. So we need to demand that these people be released Okay, they've been in jail 35, 40, 50 years, right? We celebrate, we go to watch the movies about Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers without realizing that there's still people from the Black Panther Party who are in prison, right? And so that's real life stuff. And that needs to be part of our demand for reparations.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And we need,
yes.
and we need to demand,
I'm right.
we need to demand that, a lot of people in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, for example, who have these criminal histories and records around marijuana possession, or things like that. The records need to be cleaned and expunged. Now, I'm not talking about guys who got, shootings and homicides connected to them out there hustling. I'm talking about guys who got busted for smoking weed, they got busted for possession of weed, and they get possession with intent to deliver, and they got a little bit of weed, and if they delivered all of it and sold all of it, it might like go to no more than 25 or 50 people. But then they get labeled as some big time drug dealer. We need to stop that foolishness, because now we have mostly white corporations led by white men or white LLCs that have came together and started businesses based on growing marijuana and distributing marijuana. And in many states, it's been either legalized or it's been decriminalized. But we still got people sitting up in prison. We got people sitting up in federal prison and some in state jails or state prisons. And so that needs to be part of our call for reparations too.
Yeah, I'm definitely for that. As I, what my background was, and I see that all the time. Them getting 20 years for, and the thing about it is, the white collar workers could do the same thing as embezzling and all that, and they may get probation or anything like that. And I know that's a little bit off the record, and something different, not off the record totally, but I see that, and you're absolutely right. It's disgusting.
It is. So when we talk about reparations, again, some people think that reparations is just a check. And, sometimes we'll use that phrase just to emphasize how important it is for us to get reparations. We'll say, look, just cut the check, stop all the crap, right? Just cut the check. But that's just the slang that we use to emphasize how important of an issue it is, and to emphasize the immediacy of the Black community receiving reparations. Like, we want reparations not 25 years from now, okay? We want reparations like yesterday. So we say cut the check. But when we deal with the nitty gritty, reparations is much, much more than just cutting the check. You know what I mean? It involves some of the things that you all have talked about. Yes, the cash is important, but what about the housing part of it? And not a mortgage. It's not about a mortgage. It's about, look, it's about a down payment. It's about a full payment for decent housing, right? It's about economic development districts to make sure that these banks and finance companies and these racist, white supremacist loan officers, that the power is taken away from them, and that Black people who may want to start their own business somewhere are able to get a loan if they qualify. And that the same type of criteria that's used to qualify the loan application for a white person should be used to qualify the loan application for a Black person, right? Don't ask Black people to jump through 50 hoops, but this white person only has to fill out the application and turn it in, right? So we talk about reparations, we are talking about all these kind of things. Let's look at healthcare, for example. Yes, we're grateful that some of us are able to get certain aspects of our healthcare premium subsidized. But here within the United States of America, one of the wealthiest nations on the face of the earth, how is it that our country, and our local government as well, can afford all types of gear for the police, but people can't come up with subsidies or just a straight out full payment when it comes to healthcare? So people say, we want healthcare, free healthcare. That's exactly what we mean. There's enough money, there's enough resources out here, right, for all folks in this country to have absolutely free healthcare. The doctors, the hospitals, the medical corporations, they're making a killing. Within our own city, we have a so-called nonprofit, I say so-called, talking about UPMC, right? That makes more money than any of us could even like imagine, right? And they pay almost zero taxes. Okay, why can't the city, why can't the county hold UPMC accountable? Okay, and make sure that they pay their fair share towards perhaps a pot of money that will go towards reparations for the Black community. Same thing with US Steel. You know, US Steel used to work Black people to death, literally, you know, when the steel mills were up and running. And yeah, they paid pretty well for that particular time, you know, but Black workers were still discriminated against. Black workers had to fight extra hard. Black workers were oftentimes assigned to the dirtiest, most dangerous jobs. Right. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so reparations are due.
The most dangerous areas.
There it is. So reparations are due. US Steel made billions and billions and billions of dollars. And then let's talk about the connection between US Steel and the quasi-slave labor market that existed in different parts of the South when it came to convict leasing, right? Where, you know, we could be walking up and down the street and we could be charged with vagrancy and we could be taken to a judge's court or taken to a magistrate. We're charged with vagrancy, we're given a fine, but now in the courtroom, there's a representative of a steel company that's connected to US Steel, and they agreed to pay our fine or pay our bail, but then we go to work for them. And we wind up working for them for years and years and years and years and years, far, far exceeding the value of the original fine that they paid for, right? Who benefited from that? US Steel Corporation and affiliated steel corporations. Who suffered? The Black people who got caught up in that convict leasing scheme, right? And so reparations is due for all of that. We talk about US Steel, we talk about UPMC. Hey, let's talk about the University of Pittsburgh, who has founding members who were slave owners. Let's talk about the University of Pittsburgh. If you travel through Oakland, there's certain streets in Oakland that are named after certain founding members or board of trustee folks from the University of Pittsburgh. But when you dig a little deeper, you find out that these guys actually own slaves. They own Black people, right? So all this stuff is connected. All this stuff is connected. So we have a lot of places that we can go to examine and look at the role that they played in the exploitation and oppression of folks of African descent right here in the city of Pittsburgh and throughout Allegheny County. We could talk about UPMC not paying their fair share. We could talk about the University of Pittsburgh and some of their founding members and some of their benefactors. We could talk about US Steel and their connection to convict leasing schemes throughout the South. You know, we could talk about like one of the founding fathers who has a local university named after him, who helped to bankroll the American Revolution, but he was a slave trader and a slave master. We're talking about Robert Morris. We got Robert Morris University, okay, a esteemed local university, and this is no exaggeration, probably has one of the best business programs and accounting programs in the area. And I would say, well, why not? You know, historically is based on a guy who used to do a lot of accounting and business management of African bodies, of Black bodies. It's a slave trader and he's a slave master. So we can also look at the various insurance companies and banks and transportation companies that are connected to Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, who have a lot of history connected to slavery and to Jim Crow. So, you know, there's a lot of room for us to explore, and there's a lot of things that need to be uncovered as we push forward and make our claim for reparations. Any other thoughts and ideas?
I mean, I've only, I've kind of been silent in it during this discussion because I only spent like about a year in Pittsburgh. But just, you know, Brother Khalid, since the last 3 years of me being paralyzed, I've had a lot of like interaction with the, you know, healthcare, especially as it comes to like insurance and stuff like that, you know, and the just the like you were mentioning, as far as, you know, the uh, prioritization of funds for, you know, like you were saying, like police and military and different things like that, over the you know, our citizens here that, you know, are dealing with all kinds of medical issues, you know, mine in particular, you know, of course, like one of the first things that I realized after becoming paralyzed was there was no way that I was going to be able to afford this injury on my own. It actually, you know, would definitely required like, you know, insurance. And the challenge that I've actually had is I have like 3 different insurances just try to cover all of my expenses, you know, and even with like 3 different, that's not enough, you know. So as far as just speaking for the fight for healthcare, and like you mentioned that this is, you know, that's just a small part of the history that we've had to deal with. So I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of that and agree, as far as there's so much, you know, so many different aspects that we can look at this, and how important it would be is for our people.
Absolutely. Yeah, so reparations is certainly something that's due to us, and we should never be shamed into thinking that we have no right to demand that reparations be given to us, you know, because there's some narratives out here that say, well, reparations was already afforded to Black people with the passage of the civil rights bills of the 1960s, or that reparations, and this really sounds ridiculous, that we already have received reparations because Barack Obama was elected as the first Black president of the United States. Believe it or not, there are some forces out there who claim that that itself was reparations for the Black community. And that's utterly ridiculous. Barack Obama, you know, whether or not I disagree with his politics, let's just talk about his financial and economic reality. Barack Obama, before he became the president, was already a millionaire. And after he left the presidency, since then, he's become a multimillionaire. Barack Obama can agree to speak at a college or university, especially those colleges, universities that have a lot of money, and he can demand an honorarium of, you know, a minimum of $10,000 just for talking for an hour. In some cases, get $100,000 for showing up, right? So, you know, his becoming the first Black president has nothing to do with addressing the economic and social injustices that have afflicted those of us of African descent, stemming from the transatlantic slave trade up until this very moment. So yes, reparations are due. No amount of election or selection of Black public officials satisfies that. No amount of opportunity or success or recognition of Black celebrities. And this is not to slant them, because these brothers and sisters have worked very hard to be able to accomplish what they've been able to accomplish within their own respective field. But no amount of Black celebrities, whether they be athletes, whether they be entertainers, no amount is equal or compensation when it comes to reparations for the 40 to 50 million Black people who currently reside here within the United States of America, right? So, you know, we got to be clear about that. Like, representation is not reparations, okay? Individual financial or economic success is not reparations for the Black collective, all right? People being elected to public office is not reparational justice for the Black community, okay? People who win the Super Bowl, people who win the NBA championship, we applaud all of them. We love them because they come from amongst our tribe, our collective tribe. But their individual personal success or the success of their particular team is not equivalent to reparations for 45 to 50 million Black people, right? And we should never forget that. oftentimes what some Black public officials have done in recent years, since there's been a lot of conversation about reparations, they have proposed some policy measures that they try to pass off as reparations for the Black community. So we hear Black public officials say, oh yeah, well, we're going to have a housing program, or we're going to have a business program for poor sections of the Black community, and this is reparations. No, it ain't. That's you doing what you're supposed to be doing all
Supposed
along.
to do, right.
That's what you're supposed to do, right? Black people been paying taxes, so you're supposed to do that. We're talking about reparations. We're talking about dealing with the harm, repairing the harm connected to or as a result of the enslavement of folks of African descent, transatlantic slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, the impact of Jim Crow, the impact of mass incarceration, the impact of COINTELPRO, all of that. We want reparations for that stuff. Right now, all this other stuff is what you're supposed to do anyway. You get paid to do that, and we paying you to do that because you keep taking money from our paychecks, or you take money from our, from the money that we gross from our businesses. So we paying you to do what you're supposed to do, right? And as long as we are tax-paying people in this country, and as long as we are compelled to pay taxes, and as long as we are compelled at some point to defend part of this territory or land, then we deserve reparations, period, right? Period, okay, for what happened before. And that's just the bottom line. Any thoughts, any more thoughts or ideas as we start to move on?
Yeah, you're so right about that. As far as, I know that Black people paid more taxes than white people back in the day, and it was only to make them, it's always the agenda, and I'm not racist at all, but it is what it is. But the Caucasians, they always have to be a step ahead of us and to make sure that we didn't get. And it's a shame that the Black families had to pay more money and had less money and less jobs and had to pay more taxes than white people. I was reading about that as well, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I mean,
so they're,
yeah. That's a very good point. It's not necessarily more money just in hardcore dollars and cents, right? But what you're really saying is that in connection to the incomes that we have, right? We pay more money out of our income to taxes than other people because they have more money to begin with, right? So, if we're only getting paid $100 and out of that $100, we got to pay $30, right, for taxes, it's going to have a greater impact on us than someone else who may have to pay $50 in taxes, but they already coming home with $1,000 in income, right? So
I know back in the day they did. I'm sorry.
Right. So I mean, I understood what you were saying, but I just want to make it clear because yes, if somebody is a well-to-do person and they're like a millionaire, and so they make a lot more money than you and I, and so their taxes are going to be more because they make a lot more money. But compared to the percentage of the income that they have or the money that they have, when you compare it to what most of us have, we're paying a lot more, right? Because we have a lot less to pay from. And that again, some people have argued that taxes need to be structured in a way where it's based more on your income as opposed to just a certain percentage, right? And so, I mean, I'm not all that knowledgeable about that particular argument, and I'm not all that familiar with the numbers, but I understand where you're coming from. We look at the rich and wealthy people, they find all types of ways to minimize the amount of taxes that they pay, but they want to enjoy the benefits that comes from living in a society where you're recognized as a citizen or as a resident, and there's certain benefits and privileges that come with that. So for example, you get the multinational corporations who do everything they can to minimize the amount of taxes that they have to pay to the government, even if it means taking their profits and hiding it from the government and putting it in banks in other countries around the world that they can control. So they don't want to pay taxes on the money that they make, on the profits that they make, but they want you and I to always pay our income taxes. And if we have a small business, they want to make sure that we pay the taxes on whatever our gross profit is. But the really rich and wealthy businesses and corporations, they get all types of lawyers and all types of accountants and all types of financial specialists to come up with loopholes and all types of ways where their tax liabilities are minimized. And so I understand exactly where you're coming from. But again, I'm not an expert in that field. And so my way of describing it is probably not, not very accurate or sound.
Right.
Again, I would suggest that all of us, if we're interested, we can do some additional research. But
that's
I was
going to say, I'm sorry, that's such a good idea, because a lot of things go by your income.
Yeah.
So why can't that? So yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But one thing we all agree upon, and one thing we all know, and we don't have to be traditional experts. We don't have to have PhDs in economics, and we don't need PhDs in history to know that reparations are due to us as Black folk in this country, right?
Yeah,
and we
that's
don't
right.
need PhDs in social sciences to realize that we still continue to be impacted by the racist inclinations and the racist institutions and systems and structures that we call white supremacy that continue to impact us, folks of African descent, each and every day that we walk this earth, that we continue to live here within the United States of America. And we also don't have to be PhDs or academics, and no slight to our PhDs or academics. We love those brothers and sisters who are out here using their minds and their intellect as a way to further Black liberation and freedom, including reparations. We need those brothers and sisters, but we know that they do some very special work. But we know that, for those of us who aren't academics, who aren't the PhDs, we know that just on a grassroots level, that reparations are due for Black folks in this country. And it is an idea whose time has come. But again, we have to be very careful and very mindful of how this most recent narrative around reparations is being discussed and how it's being addressed. Again, we know we have some Black public officials who have been pushing reparations for a hot minute. And we know in some instances, in some local municipalities, people have been successful in presenting what some people would describe as a reparational justice package. Myself and a few others, in some instances, may not necessarily support those packages. Some we do, some we don't. Because again, reparations is not doing what your government was supposed to be doing all along. So if you have a housing problem and your city council person is proposing that reparations for segments within the Black community would be some type of affordable mortgages, that's not reparations. That is just addressing what should have been addressed a long time ago, because you continue to pay your tax dollars and you continue to vote for this public official so he or her could address those issues. So that's not reparations. Reparations also isn't a bank coming in and saying, we're going to give a few loans, we're going to give a few mortgages to the people within this Black community based on the zip code. That's not reparations either, right? Because you still have a mortgage. And the way this system works is that, yeah, they'll, have a ceremony and they'll talk about the groundbreaking on some new housing development, or they'll have a little luncheon and they'll celebrate the loan officers and the bank who's making these loans and these mortgages to a select group of Black families and individuals. But in these days and times, with the impact of COVID-19, with the downturn of this nation's economy, don't miss one of those mortgage payments. You better not miss over 2 or 3, because at that point, the ceremonial stuff will be forgotten, and that home will be repossessed by the same bank and finance company that had previously been touted as so progressive. So we got to be clear. Reparations means just that. We want what is due to us because of the damage that was done and that continues to be done. And we want it like yesterday. We don't want this to be like, played out over the next 50 years or so. Now, that doesn't mean that reparations has to, a complete reparational justice package has to be delivered within 30 days. We're not saying that either. But we are saying that there needs to be a firm commitment and a firm timeline and how reparations are to be organized and distributed to the target groups and to the target communities and neighborhoods. And so we want to focus on Allegheny County and the city of Pittsburgh. And we hope that we can learn from the experiences of other people who've came before us. And we hope that if we do things correctly, or even as we make mistakes, we recognize those mistakes and address those mistakes as quickly and as thoroughly as we can, that we can inspire others and that others can also learn from us. So that's where we are. Any other questions or comments?
No, I just wanted to say that it's a great idea, and I'm glad you brought this on the forefront, given, a platform for this that need to be discussed, and it's important, and it's long overdue. So
Yes,
I just
absolutely.
appreciate it,
Well, if you guys can just pardon me for 1 minute, I'm gonna try to grab a little link or something that people can jump on and refer to for some additional information about this. And, we want people to plug in. We want people to get involved, get involved with the movement, to join. This is just one of several meetings that we've had in the past and that we will continue to have about reparations in general, and specifically reparations here in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. Let me see if I can get this link going here. And so we were normally scheduled to end this around 3 o'clock, but we're gonna try to end this in the next 5 or 10 minutes. And again, this is just one of a series of ongoing meetings such as this that we will have around this issue.
Yes. And while you're doing that, I'll just touch base on, I've been in touch with Erica Yeska on a young man that's incarcerated. I mean, I've always done this type of thing. It doesn't have to be, everybody doesn't have to know, but I always was interested in that. The young men that they just put in jail because they don't have good representation, lies and deceit that the DA cover-ups and stuff like that, trying to get them out of the system and have a new trial. So there's one young man that was trying to work with Erica about, and there was another young man, and that things one day will be uncovered about their cover up, and they're not giving the African American man the due justice and the right justice, and they need to uncover a lot. They just trying to just blame anybody for a crime and it's not even the truth. And I always say, I wish there was a real Perry Mason around here, helping these young African American guys, just because he uncovered the truth. And, where you end up telling on yourself if you ever watch Perry Mason. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We don't have anybody like that around. But I know the Philadelphia lawyers are pretty good with and it doesn't matter what nationality. It seems like the Philadelphia lawyers really go for the truth, some of them.
Well,
so I'm working on that.
Okay, well, I don't know the circumstances around the young folk that you're talking about. Maybe you could call me, we could talk about it in more detail. You can have Erica call me as well.
Yeah,
And,
I will.
we can talk about it. But, we do have a group that's committed to justice, and it's based here in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. It's called the Abolitionist Law Center. And they've been
Oh.
very instrumental in securing freedom for political prisoners, as well as
Okay.
for juveniles or people who were formerly juveniles who have been incarcerated since they were juveniles. They had been sentenced to
Oh.
life or sentenced to long prison sentences as youngsters, and it was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court a few years ago. And so the Abolitionist Law Center has been very instrumental in fighting and advocating for freedom and for the release of juvenile lifers. And they've been fighting for the release of political prisoners as well.
Okay, I'm gonna need that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna get that information
okay,
from you.
okay. And again, this is a group that's local to Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. They have, one of the founders, I believe, is a brother by the name of Brett Grody, and he actually went to law school in the area, I do believe. And then they have a new executive director who is a formerly incarcerated person, who actually is one of the beneficiaries of the work that the Abolitionist Law Center had done over the years.
Okay.
His name is Salim Holbrook. So, there are people in our area that you can touch base with who may be able to help you.
Yes,
Right,
thank you
right,
for that
right. And
information.
then there's a local attorney here who's taken on some controversial cases from time to time. His name is Paul Ubis, I do believe. I don't know whether you know Paul or not.
Ubis?
Yeah, I think it's Ubis or Jubis, either one. I have his, excuse me, Paul, if you see this, I forgot the spelling of your last name, but Paul's a pretty decent guy. And he
Okay.
also is taking on some controversial cases from time to time around police brutality, police misconduct, and so forth and so on.
Okay, great.
So again, you and I can talk about this in more detail later. Erica,
Okay,
she
all
can
right.
call me, we can all get together and
Yeah,
have a discussion
yeah, she
about it.
didn't know, so I will relay that information to her. That's good. I'm glad I'm on here today, finding
Okay.
out a lot.
And also, I just put a link here for the campaign. It's called the Campaign for Reparations and Black Self-Determination. You can go to the site, the WordPress site. And again, this is just one of several meetings. We will have more and more meetings as the time goes by. We didn't have a lot of people participate, but I'm glad that those who did join in decided to do so.
Most definitely.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so, just
A quick question.
Yes.
When's the next one scheduled for?
Well, the next meeting like this, we don't have a firm date, but it will be in October. So we want to try to have these particular meetings on a monthly basis. And we'll be having some other meetings in between, but this particular meeting, we want to schedule on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Okay, so when we have a firm date, because the month of October is going to be very busy, right? So when we have a firm date for our next meeting, we'll send out an email and send out a link so people can participate. And I hope and pray that between now and then, with your help and help of other people who are more tech savvy, that we can fix and we can correct some of these mistakes around the integration of our Zoom account and Facebook Live. So we make it much more friendly and have a much more smoother process in terms of the meetings, and hopefully get more participation. We'd like to hear from everyone regarding this issue. This is a very important issue. Don't feel ashamed. Don't let people shame you into thinking that as Black people, you should not be demanding reparations. Don't do that. Seriously, don't do that. Don't let people say, oh, why you want to do that? Oh, you'll never get reparations. Oh, white folks ain't going to do this. Why you want to talk about that? You're making it bad for us, or we just need to elect more Black people in the office. Well, okay, yeah, we need to elect more Black people in the office, but we need to elect more Black people in the office that's going to really be about helping and uplifting the Black community.
Exactly. I'm telling you, I'm really feeling that way. Talking to another person that had a issue, reached out to a Black representative, and got no help at all. So it's not even about what you look like. It's all about what you could do or what you are willing to do. Because some of them, it's something, because I'm all about voting for my people. But a lot of times, and I don't care what color you are, it's all about what you put your money where your mouth is type thing. You know, just fight. Like, you know, it just keeping up the fight, but don't say you're going to do something. Like all politicians, don't matter. They don't do what they say they're going to do, you know, once they get in office. So I just wanted to, you know, stress that, because I had that conversation with an individual that had an issue and reached out to a representative. So and voted for that representative and got out there and had their signs in the yard and all that and needed help, and really
nothing happened. Yeah, nothing happened.
She was actually crying about that, you know, and that's important. You know, if there's any politicians out there to say that they want our vote, you know, you can't say you're all for us or you're supposed to be all for the people, but don't say what you're going to do. And then when you get in, when we vote for you and put our signs in the yard, you turn around and, you know, do something different. It's hurtful. So I just want to stress that, you know, if any of them listening, you know, we're not, you know, Black people pay attention to things like that.
It is. So, yeah, you're right. And it is hurtful. And, you know, I remember when we first started the meeting, you talked about the disrespect that occurs within the Black community. And, you know, we were basically talking about the disrespect and the community or neighborhood violence that occurs. You know, the fact that we have so many situations where young people are being murdered. We have domestic violence situations within families and households where people are assaulting and killing one another. And there's a lot of disrespect. But again, there's a disrespect that some of our public officials demonstrate towards us as people, towards their so-called constituents. They disrespect us because they act as if they're listening to what we're saying, and then they smile and they grin and they shake hands, you know, and they pass out backpacks, you know, or they pass out chicken sandwiches. But when they get elected to office or they get reelected to office, they fail to live up to the expectations of their constituency. And they fail to even try to fulfill in a real fundamental basic way the needs of the people, right? But then when it's time for them to get reelected again, or they aspire to an office, here they come again with the same
people,
the same type of scenario, the same program and the same approach. Unfortunately, we keep going for it. We keep falling for it. And so what we have to do is we have to challenge them and break this dysfunctional relationship, right? We have to demand from our public officials, especially our Black public officials, that they do better. Now, keep in mind, we shouldn't slam all of them just because, you know, they don't do everything. You know, we got to work with them. We got to understand some of the limits of electoral politics, and there are some limitations, right? But we need to applaud them and support them when they do right, and we need to hold them accountable when they do wrong. But we have to always push them to represent our best interests collectively, not just the interests of a particular sect within the community, but to represent our best collective interests and not be afraid to fight. You know, we need courageous public officials. We need brave public officials, right? Black public officials who can stand up and speak truth to power, right? And who won't cower down. We need people who, you know, will know that they shouldn't be taking a whole bunch of this money from developers and then act like they crying the blues with us when our people are getting displaced out of these communities and neighborhoods. Well, brother or sister who's a public official, you took the dollars from that development company. You took money from those contractors to help you finance your election campaign, right? You were looking out for yourself because you wanted to get in office or stay in office, so you took the money. But now the end result is the people who had always voted for you, those people don't live in your district anymore because the developers who supported you, the monies, those dollars that you took from those people have put together a whole different housing plan that doesn't include your former constituents. So now who's going to vote for you to keep you in office? You see what I'm saying? It's almost like they're cutting their own throat, right? And there's a lot of that happening. You know, Pittsburgh, for example, has lost over the last several years. Pittsburgh has lost, and this is a conservative estimate, anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 Black residents have left Pittsburgh, right? Many of them have been forced out of the city of Pittsburgh because the neighborhoods that they lived in, they could no longer afford to live in those neighborhoods, right? And a lot of that was driven by development. And a lot of that development money, right? Well, let's not talk about the money. A lot of those development plans had to be okayed by who? They had to be okayed by local government.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Local government
Yes.
okayed those development plans. Well, local government is who? Local government is you and I, but it's you and I through who? It's you and I through our representatives. So our representatives and our districts gave the okay for this development to happen, which led to the displacement of disproportionate numbers of Black people.
Of Black people, yeah.
And these are the same Black people who voted for our representative. So if our representative continues to take this money, continues to be two-faced, continues to try to be slick, at some point, what's going to happen to our representative? Our representative is going to be with his former constituency. He or she is going to be out too, because they won't have any people left in the district who are going to vote for them.
Right.
So they're literally cutting their own throat, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because people talk and people are listening and they're paying attention.
Mhm.
So, you know, they are.
So again, so just to reiterate, we talk about reparations. You know, we're not talking about the things that our representatives should be doing anyway. We're not talking about the city council people, the county council people, the mayor or the chief executive with a new proposal to increase affordable housing in Garfield or in Braddock or in East Hills. That's not it. That's not reparations. You know, fundamentally, let me give you just an international snapshot of what reparations usually looks like on the international level. On the international level, when the parties recognize that harm has been done and that there needs to be repair and that there needs to be compensation and there needs to be recognition, right? It usually occurs around three different things. It occurs around money, land, and the reinstitution of rights. And oftentimes the reinstitution, or if not the reinstitution, the conferring of rights. And oftentimes when the people who have been wronged are people who have also resisted, as a result of their resistance, they have what are referred to as political prisoners and or prisoners of war. And so when people talk about reparations, it means, you know, we want, like if there were lands that were taken from us, or if there's land or territory that's due to us because our labor was exploited, then we want land. We also want money. And for those of us who have been criminalized, for those who have been incarcerated, for those who have been forced into exile, we want their full rights returned or restored. So we want them to be freed from incarceration, and we want their full rights to be restored, right? That's what reparations is all about, right? It's not about somebody giving you, you know, a few $1,000s for some grant money, or somebody building some affordable housing in this poor section of Pittsburgh and saying that's reparations for the Black community. No, it ain't. Where's the land? Where's the money? And where's the restoration of rights? What about the release of people who were unjustly, incarcerated? What about the release of our freedom fighters? What about the clearing of their names? That's reparations. And so when we think about ourselves as a nation of Black people within this nation called the United States of America, we will pursue reparational justice in a whole different vein. Stop the superficial crap. Stop letting people flim-flam us into thinking that some grant money here, some affordable housing there is reparations, because it ain't. So Any closing comments? And then we're going to go ahead and get on out of here. And we're going to call this a success for the day. And we're going to continue to build and look forward to our next meeting, which is going to be scheduled sometime during the month of October. Any other closing? Yes, Sister
Yeah,
Christine.
just my closing comment is that I just don't want our people to give up the fight. Pay attention and do something about it, because it has something to do with our kids and our grandkids growing up. That's what this fight is about, the future. We may not be able to do too much about, what we got to go through, but let's think about the kids. Let's not just talk about what they're doing and what they got away with and whatever. Let's do something. Let's all come together and do something. We can make a lot of progress with this. It's not right. Talk about it's not right. And it's not right. So let's just get together and do something about it.
There you go.
And
Thank
just
you.
fight,
Very well said. Brother Brian, any closing comments?
Yeah, I'm just happy that I was able to be a part of the discussion, and I agree with everything that's been said, and I look forward to further meetings. Definitely, I think we, as it stands right now through the country, looks like reparations is getting some momentum, but we definitely need to keep our foot on the gas, as mentioned a minute ago. So yeah, sounds good. Let's keep the fight.
All right. Well, I'm glad you all could make it this afternoon. And, we look forward to the next series of meetings, and we're going to be organizing even more so. Again, we started this campaign about 3 years ago. And, we've had a number before COVID-19 hit. We had community meetings. We had a town hall. People came out. It was very well attended. We had the first and only to date public hearing. We petitioned the city of Pittsburgh, and we had a public hearing in Pittsburgh City Council regarding reparations. And so that was the first time that had ever happened. And so we have some momentum, but again, COVID-19 impacted all of us and everything. And so here we are, we're having a meeting on Zoom. So we have a lot more work to do. We continue to push. And so we say reparations in our lifetime, and connected to the call for reparations is also the demand for self-determination, that we can't really enjoy our reparations until we can get rid of the chains all around our necks that keep holding us back. So it's about freedom and it's about power. And you can't have one without having the other. So I want to end on that note. Thank you again for your participation. All power to the people. Reparations in our lifetime.
And thank you. Much love.
Much love.
Bye-bye.